It was 2:13 a.m. when the phone rang. Jenna froze in the dark kitchen, her hand trembling over the refrigerator handle. Her husband, Nate, had died 6 years ago in a highway accident, body mangled, coffin sealed shut. But the voice on the other end of the line rasped with absolute certainty. "Jen, it's me. I remember everything now. You have to listen. What we buried wasn't me." She dropped the phone. Jenna Laramie lived in a small colonial house at the edge of Wilder, Vermont, a town with one gas station, 3 churches, and no streetlights past midnight. She'd grown used to silence. It settled over her like snow, cold, smothering, and always there. Since Nate's death, she'd stopped teaching, let the piano gather dust, and took a job copy editing legal documents from home. Life had become sterile, controlled, predictable. She needed it that way, because when the structure cracked, the past oozed through like rot. That night, insomnia had pulled her from bed. She'd wandered into the kitchen barefoot, making tea, when the landline rang, a number she didn't recognize. The moment she answered, her breath stopped. "Jen," the voice croaked. "Jen, it's me." Her first thought was prank call. Her second was delusion. Then the voice said something only Nate could have known. She didn't remember hanging up, just standing there, tea forgotten, the darkness thick around her. The rational part of her mind screamed, "He's dead. Buried. There was a funeral. You kissed his forehead, even though it didn't feel like him. Cold and waxy." But then she remembered something else. That odd moment in the morgue. How the coroner had refused to let her see Nate's face for more than a few seconds. "Severe cranial trauma," he'd said. "You don't want this memory." She'd let that go. She'd wanted to believe. Now she couldn't. The next morning, Jenna stood at the town library's microfiche reader, hands shaking as she scanned the accident report. Everything was as she remembered: date, time, location. A single car crash on I-91, fire damage, identity confirmed by dental records. But something new struck her. The body had been found nearly 20 miles from where Nate's GPS had last pinged. And there was a line she'd never noticed before, buried deep in the report. Victims' personal effects recovered at site do not align with witness statements. Personal effects? She checked the evidence list. 1 watch, 1 wallet, a torn notebook page with 4 names. Her name wasn't on it. She drove straight to the Wilder Police Department. The building was as sterile as ever. Linoleum floors, flickering fluorescent lights, the front desk empty except for a young officer who looked barely old enough to shave. "I need to see the file from a 2019 crash. Nathaniel Laramie." The officer blinked. "That was ruled closed. But I can get someone." Minutes passed. Jenna sat rigid in the cracked plastic chair, heart pounding. Then a woman in a charcoal suit approached, Detective Clara Moreno. She had eyes like river stones and a voice that didn't flinch. "You said Nathaniel Laramie?" Jenna nodded. Moreno's expression shifted slightly. "You're his wife." "I was." There was a pause. Then, slowly, Moreno said, "That's strange. You weren't listed in the system as next of kin. In fact, there's no record of your marriage." The room spun, and Jenna whispered, "That's not possible." Jenna's mouth went dry. "No record," she said, her voice barely audible. "We were married for 7 years. We lived here. We filed taxes together." Detective Moreno looked unconvinced, but something in her eyes flickered. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. "Do you have a marriage certificate?" she asked gently. Jenna fumbled in her purse, fingers scraping against leather and receipts until she found her wallet. She pulled out a folded, yellowed copy of the marriage license she always kept tucked behind her ID. Moreno examined it, brow furrowing. "Where was this filed?" "Windsor County," Jenna said. 2009. Moreno nodded slowly, then stood. "Give me a moment." Jenna waited, heart pounding, the hum of the overhead lights gnawing at her nerves. When Moreno returned, her face was unreadable. "We don't have this on record," she said. "Not in Wilder. Not in Windsor County. The number on this certificate doesn't match any known registry." Jenna stared at her. "Are you saying it's fake?" "I'm saying it's not in any of our systems. And that's unusual." Panic clawed at Jenna's throat. She suddenly felt like she was sliding down a slope she hadn't known existed. One memory came screaming back, her honeymoon. Nate, sunburned and grinning, calling her Mrs. Laramie at the check-in desk of that little inn in Maine. She still had the photo from that trip, didn't she? Back home, she tore through old boxes. Pictures, receipts, letters. She found the honeymoon photo, Nate holding her hand, both of them laughing on a wooden dock. Proof. It was real. They were real. She flipped it over. Her own handwriting. Bar Harbor, June 2009. But something was wrong. The date. The year. 2010, not 2009. She grabbed more documents. Tax forms, insurance policies, emails. Everything before 2010 was blurry, nothing concrete, no dates that lined up, no mentions of Nate. It was like their entire life before that year had been scrubbed clean. That night, Jenna couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the framed wedding photo. Nate in a navy suit, her in a simple white dress, the two of them smiling beneath an old oak tree. She reached behind the frame and pulled the photo out. There were no markings. No studio name, no date, no negatives. Just smooth, glossy paper. The phone rang again at 3:06 a.m. She answered it with trembling hands. "Jen," the voice said. It was clearer this time. "You're not crazy. I remember now. They did something to me. To both of us." "Who?" she whispered. "Who are you?" "I'm your husband," he said, and there was something hollow in his tone, something wrecked. "But I wasn't supposed to be. They switched me." She couldn't speak. The silence on the line stretched long, taut. "Jen," he said, "go to the cabin. The one near Lake Crystal. You'll find the rest there." Then the line went dead. Jenna hadn't thought about that place in years. They'd only gone there once. She didn't even remember telling Nate about it. Lake Crystal was 3 hours north, a secluded body of water buried in the folds of Vermont forest, the kind of place forgotten by time and people. The last time Jenna had been there, she was 19. A family friend had let them borrow the cabin for a weekend after her high school graduation. She hadn't thought about it in over a decade. And yet, he knew. She drove in silence, gripping the wheel until her knuckles blanched. The trees blurred past like silent sentinels, and the deeper she went, the more reality seemed to thin, like crossing an invisible threshold between what she remembered and what she never truly understood. The cabin stood where she remembered it, gray wood siding, moss creeping up the stone chimney, windows clouded with years of grime. The front door groaned open under her hand. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and old pine. Furniture draped in sheets. A smell like mildew and something fainter, burnt wiring? She stepped carefully, her breath shallow, eyes flicking to the corners. Nothing. Until she found the hatch. In the bedroom closet, under an old wool rug, her foot caught something metal, a handle. She pulled it up, revealing a set of narrow wooden stairs descending into darkness. Her flashlight flickered as she stepped down. The basement was unfinished, the floor dirt-packed, the air damp. But in the far corner, there was a single metal desk. On it sat a shoebox and a tape recorder, covered in a thin film of dust. She opened the box first. Inside were photos. Hundreds of them. Some of her and Nate, but altered. In some, Nate's face was slightly off, like it had been photoshopped in. In others, she wasn't in the frame at all, though she clearly remembered those moments. Her birthday at the lakeside restaurant. A hiking trip to New Hampshire. But the woman next to Nate in those photos had auburn hair. Jenna's had always been black. She touched the edge of one photo and felt sick. In the background was a mirror, and in it, the reflection showed a different man entirely. Hands shaking, she pressed play on the tape recorder. Nate's voice, raspy, slow, filled the room. "If you're hearing this, then they haven't found me yet. They will. They always do. My name is not Nathaniel Laramie. That's the name they gave me. Implanted. I found the records. I found what they did." A pause. Then a tremble in his voice. "It started with the seizures. Then the dreams. But they weren't dreams. They were memories. Someone else's. Someone who lived in Arizona. Someone who died in 2004. I remembered his wife. His kids. His murder." Jenna's knees buckled. She clutched the desk to stay upright. "I'm not crazy," the voice went on. "There are files. Experiments. I found one with my picture next to the word, Patient 61D. Look in the floorboard under the desk." She dropped to her knees, clawed at the rotted wood. It came loose easily. Inside, a manila folder, thick with papers. Her name was typed on several. And beneath it all, a photo of her, wearing a hospital gown, smiling beside a man she didn't recognize. The caption at the bottom read, "Pre-surgical image, subject 12F, memory pair protocol initiated March 18, 2010. Jenna stared at the photo, her own smile frozen in time, unfamiliar and haunting. Her mind reeled. like it had slipped its rails and now skidded through fragments of someone else's dream. She didn't remember this man, didn't remember that hospital, but the paper was real. The ink smudged beneath her trembling fingers. Memory pair protocol. The words echoed in her skull like a gunshot. She read the file. It detailed procedures she couldn't comprehend: frontal lobe stimulation, memory extraction, transfer sequencing. There were notes about identity graphs, about psychological imprinting thresholds, and something called limbic overlay resistance. Scribbled margins mentioned symptoms: migraines, dissociation, temporal disorientation. Someone had underlined that last one and written in red. Subject 12F shows strong entanglement with 61D. May suggest premature link severance. She read on, breath-catching as her name appeared again. Jenna Laramie. Born 1986. No medical history of epilepsy prior to 2010. Subject accepted into MP program after consent signed post-trauma episode. Post-trauma? Her eyes flicked to a single line. Pre-entry identity classified. Emergency override executed following subject's 2009 psychological break. Origin status, redacted. She gasped, stepping back. The floor felt like it might swallow her whole. She had no memory of a psychological break, no memory of signing anything. And yet, it explained so much. The blank spots in her past. The gaps she'd always dismissed as grief fog after Nate's death. The strange moments when time seemed to fold, when something didn't quite add up but she'd waved it off. Jenna dropped the file and bolted up the stairs, desperate for air. Outside, the wind had picked up, whispering through the trees. The lake was still, too still. The sky above it stretched wide and pitiless. She sat on the steps, hands clenched between her knees, and pulled out her phone. There was only one person left she could call, her sister, Meredith. They hadn't spoken in years. Not since the fight. But now Jenna couldn't even remember what they'd fought about. Her hands trembled as she dialed. "Hello," came the cautious voice on the other end. "Mare," Jenna whispered. "It's me." Silence. Then, "Oh my God. Jenna, I need to ask you something. Please don't hang up." A pause. "I won't." Jenna forced the words out. "What happened in 2009? Do you remember anything strange?" Silence again. Longer this time. Then Meredith said, "Is this about the accident?" Jenna froze. "What accident?" "You." "Jenna, you were in a coma. For 3 months. After the fire. I came every day. But when you woke up, you didn't remember me. You didn't remember Mom. Nothing before the fire. The doctors said it was trauma-induced amnesia. No one ever told me that," Jenna whispered. "We weren't allowed. You were part of something. Government, I think. There were people in suits. They made me sign papers. Then you vanished." Jenna's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Wait," she said. "Did I know Nate before the fire?" Meredith's answer shattered everything. "You didn't know anyone named Nate. You were engaged to someone else." The wind howled through the trees as Jenna sat paralyzed on the cabin steps, the phone slipping from her hand and landing softly in the dirt. The call was still connected. She could hear Meredith's voice faintly asking if she was okay, but it sounded like it was coming from 1,000 miles away. "You were engaged to someone else." The words burrowed into her chest, cold and merciless. A second identity had cracked open inside her like a trapdoor, and now she was falling, tumbling through memories that no longer fit. She clutched her head, squeezing her eyes shut. Flashes. A man's face, not Nate's, laughing in a candlelit restaurant. A proposal. A different ring. The scent of bergamot and books. His name. She couldn't remember it, but her body did. A wave of nausea hit her. She stumbled back inside the cabin and opened the notebook she'd found in the shoebox, spiral-bound, pages brittle, covered in looping handwriting she didn't recognize. It wasn't Nate's, and it wasn't hers. But it was familiar. March 5th, 2010. She looked at me today like I was a stranger. Said she remembered growing up in Maine, but her file says New Jersey. That's the third mismatch. It's not sticking. The graft is too thin. March 10th, 2010. Protocol 12F rejected primary bonding. Reassigned to 61D. Signs of imprint bleed. Starting to question dream content. Recommending sedation cycle extension. March 15th, 2010. She calls me Nate now. She believes it. But she keeps asking about the ring. Keeps wondering why she can't remember the proposal. This is going to unravel. They always unravel. The room spun. Jenna felt bile rise in her throat. Nate wasn't real. Not entirely. He was part of the protocol Subject 61D, paired to her for reasons she couldn't yet understand. But he'd broken through. Somehow he'd remembered. And now, so was she. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word in the text. Run. She turned toward the front window just in time to see the first car pull up. Unmarked. Black. Tinted windows. Another followed, then a third. Her mind screamed move. She grabbed the file, the photos, the recorder, and bolted out the back. The wood stretched behind the cabin, dense, wet, and cold. She didn't think, just ran, branches slashing her arms, feet sinking into mud, adrenaline pounding in her ears. Behind her, voices. Flashlights slicing the trees. They were searching, calling her name. She ducked into a dry creek bed, crouched low behind a fallen log, chest heaving. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. She put it to her ear, hands trembling. It was him. Nate. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything, he said. But I didn't know. Not until they tried to erase me again. I left something else for you, in the safe deposit box under the name Fielder. Keys in your old piano. If they catch you, they'll wipe you again. Don't let them. You have to finish what we started. A rustle nearby. Voices closer now. Then a whisper, not from the phone, but behind her. Subject 12F located. She turned. A figure in black stepped into view, holding a syringe. The syringe gleamed in the moonlight, a sliver of silver tipped with something murky and green. Jenna's scream caught in her throat as the figure lunged. She twisted away, her foot slipping in the wet leaves, and fell hard, pain snapping through her shoulder. But adrenaline surged. She kicked out blindly, her boot striking the figure's leg. He stumbled, and she scrambled up, bolting deeper into the woods. Branches tore at her skin. Her lungs burned. Voices echoed behind her, calm, clinical commands. Subject is mobile. Zone 3 perimeter in effect. Memory integrity likely compromised. Repeat. Do not allow contact with public. Jenna's mind spiraled. She was being hunted like a fugitive, but not for crimes. For what she knew. For who she used to be. Or maybe, who she was before they decided to rewrite her. The woods thinned suddenly, opening onto a road. A single car barreled down it, headlights cutting through fog. Jenna ran into the middle of the street, arms waving wildly. The car screeched to a stop, tires screaming. A horn. Then the driver's door flung open. Jenna. It was Meredith. Jenna collapsed against the hood, tears spilling down her face. Drive, she gasped. Please. Don't ask. Just drive. Meredith didn't argue. They sped off, the black shapes of the pursuers shrinking in the rearview. For a long while, they said nothing. Jenna pressed a towel Meredith handed her to her bleeding arm and stared at the trees whipping past. Finally, Meredith broke the silence. Where do I take you? Jenna closed her eyes. There's a key. In my piano. And I need to get to a bank in Hartford. Safe deposit box. Name is Fielder. Meredith nodded slowly. You're going to tell me what the hell is going on? I will, Jenna said, voice shaking. If I can figure it out myself. Back in Jenna's house, the piano stood where it always had, under the window, silent and heavy with dust. She opened the bench and felt around. Her fingers grazed something metal, taped to the underside. A small brass key. They drove to Hartford in silence, arriving at the bank just before closing. The clerk, a woman with a knowing smile and tired eyes, didn't blink at the alias. Inside the safe deposit box was a single leather-bound book and a flash drive. They took it to Meredith's apartment, locked the doors, pulled the blinds. Jenna plugged in the drive. A video file. She hit play. The screen showed a sterile white room. 2 chairs. A man strapped into one. His face was familiar, but not Nate. Not quite. Then the timestamp clicked, March 17, 2010. A voice from off-camera. Subject 61D. Do you consent to memory transposition for pairing with Subject 12F? The man nodded slowly. I want to see her again. Another voice. Begin download. Jenna's stomach twisted. She watched as the man convulsed, back arching. She watched the screen go black. Then a final frame appeared. Prototype pairing. Merge memory construct 1.0. Status. Unstable. Jenna stared at her reflection in the dark screen. She didn't know who she was anymore. But she knew this wasn't the end. Because she hadn't asked the question that scared her most. If Nate wasn't real, then who was she? The walls of Meredith's apartment seemed to shrink around Jenna as the truth bore down. The final words on the screen, merge memory construct 1.0, status, unstable, looped in her mind like a curse. Her entire life had been a patchwork of someone else's love, someone else's pain. The man she'd mourned wasn't hers. The life she thought she built was fabricated. But the worst part wasn't Nate. It was her. She had no idea who she really was. Meredith stood frozen behind her, hands pressed to her mouth. "What the hell does that mean?" she whispered. "Jenna, what are you?" Jenna couldn't answer. Not yet. She opened the leather-bound book from the deposit box. Inside were clinical notes, entries from different doctors, timestamps spanning 2009 to 2011. And deep in the pages, photos of herself in different phases, smiling, sedated, restrained. Then one page caught her breath. Original identity, Sarah Elwood. Born May 19, 1985. Subject experienced catastrophic psychological trauma after witnessing fiancé's murder-suicide. Dissociative fugue followed by catatonia. Selected for protocol due to high cognitive resilience and total memory void post-incident. Sarah Elwood. She whispered the name aloud. It felt foreign, but her pulse quickened. A heat bloomed in her chest, some hidden memory trying to fight its way out. Meredith was staring at her now, pale and trembling. "That's not your name." "It is," Jenna said, voice cracking. It was. She flipped the page. Phase 1. Personality stabilization via artificial memory construction. Phase 2. Emotional pairing through memory merging with donor subject, 61D. Outcome. Partial stabilization. Memory leak observed. Recommend termination. There were timestamps after that. Dates in 2011 marked unstable. Reintegration failed. Decommissioned. But she wasn't decommissioned. She'd been released. Scrubbed. Planted in a quiet town with a curated past. Given a life. A name. A husband who didn't exist. They never expected her to remember. The final note, handwritten, was circled in red ink. If 12F regains pre-graphed memory, subject may experience identity collapse. Recommend containment or full reset. A knock on the door shattered the silence. Jenna's blood went cold. Meredith backed away. No, we didn't tell anyone." Another knock. Louder this time. Then a calm voice. "Miss Laramie, or should I say Miss Elwood? We'd like to speak with you." She recognized the voice. From the tape. From the notebook. The one who'd overseen the experiments. Jenna grabbed the flash drive and ran to the back, pulling Meredith with her. Out the fire escape. Down into the alley. Into the night. They drove, fast, without direction. Jenna's thoughts racing ahead of her heart. She had the proof. She had her identity. But it wasn't safe, not until everyone knew what had been done. Not until the other subjects, if there were more, were found. She opened her phone and did what terrified her most. She uploaded the files. To every news station. Every outlet. Every whistleblower site. And then, in the silence that followed, she asked Meredith, "If they built a version of me to forget, does that mean the real me was too dangerous to survive?" Meredith looked at her, eyes soft, voice barely audible. "Or maybe you were the only one who ever knew the truth." Behind them, sirens. In front of them, the dark road. And Jenna, Sarah, finally knew her name. But she wasn't going back. She was going to burn it all down.